Hi everybody, welcome to Woman Up. My name's Leah and I'm joined as usual by Sue. Hi Sue.
Hi, Leah. Another week down.
Another week down. It's awful,
How
isn't
many
it?
left? How many left?
Today we're joined by Irene Lawrence. Irene is a radical feminist and prominent figure serving as a board member for WDI USA and also as the programme coordinator for the organisation's non-violent direct actions. In her professional role, she works within state government, advocating for those who were formerly incarcerated. Her experience in justice reform underscores her deep commitment to the rights of incarcerated women. Recently, WDI USA held their gender abolition tour throughout the USA, and it was during the Portland part of this tour, which was focused ironically on male violence against women, that the women encountered disgusting, violent physical assaults by so-called trans rights activists, which people probably would have seen the footage of, and it's just awful. Before we talk about that, Irene, can you tell us how you peaked?
Sure. Thank you so much for that nice introduction. I'm really glad to be joining you all
Thank you
tonight.
for doing what you're doing.
Yeah. I peaked more recently than I would like to admit. I was listening to a podcast from run by some women who focus on violence against women, domestic violence, and stopping victim blaming. And I don't even know if they would consider themselves radical feminists, but on their podcast, they were talking about sex and gender and the differences between those, and the fact that that people who I identify as trans are really just the sex that they always were, but they just are putting on this identity that has no basis in material reality. And that was the first time I'd heard it defined so clearly, and it just immediately made sense to me. And I was like, why is it not always talked about in this way? That, of course people can dress however they want, but they're never going to actually change sex. And like without any further ado, I realized that I was actually one of these awful TERFs that I had been hearing about. And I wanted to know more. I wanted to explore what others had to say on this. And I had exactly one Facebook post that I posted very recently, soon after peaking, and two friends who I'd had for like over 10 years, without any discussion, told me that they were never going to talk to me again. Everything I said was horrible, and they were very offended. And that really, it took a turn very quickly. And I realized that that there was much more going on here than I had realized. Certainly there was more going on than just my relationship with these friends. That there was, a much darker societal forces at play here. And I realized I would need to find a community to talk about this with and learn more from. So I found WDI just on the internet. I'm not sure exactly how, but I found the declaration, and it almost seemed like too obvious to even need to be stated that, of course, mothers are female, and of course women and girls have the right to gather apart from men. Like, I didn't even think we needed to say that, but I immediately signed, and I was like, I think I want to get involved with this. And so I, became a volunteer, did the orientation. And initially I did some help with the state legislative advocacy that WDI does, like looking for bills and working on like bill testimony and stuff. And then I became very involved in the FOIA project that we had been working on, which was published recently. And that was kind of not redoing, but doing another version of a project we'd done a couple years ago where, or not me, but the organization did this a couple years ago, where we did FOIA requests in all 50 states, US states. to ask them how many males were in the female prison in that state, because most states just have one female prison. And so that was a really interesting project that was a tremendous effort and yielded some very interesting information from states, as well as, you know, numbers of males. So anyway, that was how I kind of initially started with volunteering with WDI USA. And then early in 2023, I learned that they were starting these public actions. And I was immediately excited about that because of the chance to confront power more directly, I guess. So to really just make these points of the Declaration known in a clearer, broader way, and doing it in a way that's that's important to Americans. Like the right to free speech is just, you know, should be important to everyone, but to Americans, it's a very sacred value. And I knew just from that, you know, one interaction with my friends on Facebook that this was going to be really, really hard to have calm public interactions about. But of course, that's what we would all prefer, is for these to be calm, rational.
Do you have family that do support you in this? Or did you have to, the community of WDI that?
Not really. I've been very slowly telling friends and family. Well, my parents and my brother know, and they have their support has been tenuous at best. I've told a handful of friends who are like I've known my whole life, like they're practically like family, and their response has been, you know, basically we'll always support you, you know, no matter what you're doing. But they're definitely they definitely have questions, and they're very everyone seems very shocked that I care about this as much as I do, which is interesting because I don't feel like that was such a question in any of the other like advocacy type things I've done, like with you know, justice reform here in the US, and like a little bit of work that I've done around housing advocacy. Like, I don't feel like I got this many questions when I was working on those issues. Like, people didn't ask me like, why do you care? The way that they ask that when it's about this. So it's interesting because this obviously actually does affect me, whereas those other issues have not directly affected me personally. So
what do you say when they ask you why you care so much?
I would say I'm not sure how much I'm not sure how deep I have gotten with all of the friends and family who've asked this, but what I would say to you is, I mean, I feel that every right and freedom that I take for granted is because of the sacrifices of previous generations of women who put themselves at great risk and great risk of harm and, you know, social ostracization and all that in order to create the world that I enjoy. And so it's just impossible for me to imagine a future where women have less than I had. I just can't fathom a world where women have less. And even the present is hard to tolerate sometimes.
Yeah, it's also for the young girls that are growing up. You know, you want a future for them to be the same that we've taken for granted. And I think the problem is a lot of these people that they don't understand the history and have fought for and you know, like with the suffragettes and they endured to get us to a place where we were. And now they're people just seem to think, yeah, it's just very strange the way people do question it. Why do you care? Families say the same thing to me. Why do you care? It doesn't affect you.
Especially people who have known you for sometimes decades. It's like, you know, my character. You know that I'm not some bigot. And all of a sudden you're acting like I'm believing in something that's so socially unacceptable, when all I want is no men in women's spaces and for children not to be medicalized. Personally, that's what I want.
Yeah. It's been so jarring to see so many people who I know are really, really smart, and they just, I feel like they're turning their brains off on this particular issue. And it's just, yeah, it's really disturbing. And I think I know our politics can get, what's the word? Sometimes it gets exported to other places in certain ways, but in the US, we're just so extremely polarized. And most of my community, as is most of the women of WDI USA, tend to be on the left, although we are a nonpartisan organization. And yeah, part of the issue with this is if you question this ideology at all, people assume you're on the right. And that's so not accurate. But even with the violence in Portland, which I know we'll get into, when I told my parents about that, they couldn't even condemn it, because it was like, these are people on the left, so we can't criticize it.
Wow.
And so I think that shows, that just shows the degree of polarization, that even when violence is happening to someone in your family, you can't, people are very uncomfortable, like, saying anything about it.
Issue, and I think this is where the trans activists have been very successful in continuously claiming it's extreme right-wing behaviour or opinion, and it's got nothing to do. I just think in this fight we're politically blind, and it's got nothing to do with politics. It's about women's rights, you know, keeping us safe. Unless there's no predatory man that exists in the world in 2023, I'm sure so much violence already towards women. The only time is there was no predatory man. And
it's always going to be relevant.
Yeah, and then a man putting on a dress or a wig completely eradicates any chance that he could ever be violent towards a woman.
Right. It's not about the dress, it's the fact that he's a man.
Yeah.
And male violence. And we've seen in prisons that the rate of offence is higher than for a trans identifying man than it is in the general male population too. And I think that's pretty standard across the world with men that are claiming they're women in jail.
Yeah. Well, I can send the FOIA thing, and I can maybe find it right now too. But we found some data, I think it was from Keep Prison Single Sex, that showed that the rate of trans identifying men who were sex offenders was much higher, than for the regular male population in federal prison.
Yeah.
Because of the paraphilia, and it escalates. Can you tell us about Portland then? Because it's a crazy story how it all kicked off. Because you were originally supposed to be in a library, weren't you?
Yeah. So so let me back up a little bit. So we've been having these public actions since I think since late 2022. And there were at least a couple that I wasn't around for, but the first one was in Oakland, which was in January. There was an action we did in March in Florida. On Mother's Day, we did an action in New York City right in front of the UN that was specifically about mothers and the status of motherhood as, for females. In July, we were in Philadelphia, where we talked about free speech. And then in San Francisco, we had our annual convention, and we talked about the rights of lesbians, because we thought that was fitting for San Francisco and their history of support for gay and lesbian rights. And then, yeah, finally, November, we were in Portland. And that was, of course, ironically, specifically about violence against women and children. So yeah, there are many twists and turns of this story, but yes.
Did you have violent so-called trans rights activists against you on every single one of those days?
So most of them, yeah. So in the New York City one, it was right in front of the UN, and there was like law enforcement right there. So there wasn't like a mob, but there was a handful of harassers.
The proliferation of this all-encompassing ideology affects us all, of course, but it affects mothers in a particular way. Mothers, more than any other group, have a visceral connection to another person that can never be replaced by the co-opting of human reproduction, longed for by gender identity ideologues. The power of this connection is clear from the way that many cultures joke and the insults that we hear about mothers. When you really want to hurt somebody, the person you attack is their mother. So pretending now that women are now a nebulous category by replacing sex with gender identity, as UN Women now does, is to insult all women, but particularly one's own mother. Not all women become mothers, of course, but all mothers are women.
In Philadelphia and San Francisco, there was a group of extremely loud and angry protesters, but in both cases, the police were there, and there were enough of them to kind of keep us separate.
Women's rights group Women's Declaration International held an annual 3-day convention in San Francisco. On the second day, protesters started showing up to their hotel.
They've actually locked the hotel entrance to keep them out, essentially also keeping us in.
Flyers that contained a logo from the Communist Party USA were distributed, helping organize the protests. The group also promoted the protest on social media.
We eventually ended up experiencing some really severe intimidation tactics.
Dansky said that for the most part, protesters stayed outside of the hotel, but things escalated as time went on.
At one point, one of the protesters took a hammer to the hotel's main sign and attempted to destroy it.
Dansky said that eventually almost a dozen police officers were present, plus hotel security.
They really wanted to intimidate us into not meeting because this movement, the so-called gender identity movement, really does not like it when women gather as a sex class to talk about our rights.
There was also an art gallery launch that featured all female artists. The gallery was unrelated to the convention, but many members went to support the opening.
But then by the next morning, it had been vandalized as well. And someone had written the phrase, "No TERFs on our turf."
TERF stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist and is a term the protesters were using to describe members of Women's Declaration International and the art gallery artists. Despite the pushback effort, the convention still happened as planned.
We talked about women in academia. We talked about the experiences of detransitioners. We had no intention of engaging with any protesters. We weren't interested in counter-protesting. We were there to have a women's rights event, and we followed through with it.
After meeting, the group firmly plans to continue their advancement of women's sex-based rights globally. Reporting in San Francisco, Jason Blair, NTD News.
And so we were in touch with police in both of those cases. In Portland, we were going to be inside the library. It was one branch of the Multnomah County library system. And so we had reserved a room inside the library like any member of the public can do. And we had booked an Airbnb for Friday through Sunday, which is usually what we do when we have these trainings. We'll have a group of women that we put up for the weekend. And there had been these online threats that had been building leading up to the event. And we had discussed these threats with Multnomah County. security. And so they were, they were aware, and they were telling us that they wanted to continue with the event. And then the day before, I think the day before the event, Multnomah County Security reached out to us to report a threat of gun violence, because apparently someone had talked to their therapist and said that they were intending to go to this event and that they were going to bring a gun, and if anyone messed with them, they would use it. And this, unfortunately, this is legal in Oregon. You can open carry weapons into a public library. And so that's when it got quite scary from my perspective. But yeah, the police were notified then, but we moved forward with the event. We were told there was going to be increased police presence near the library. And then the night before the event, Saturday night, people came and slashed our tires in front of the house where we were staying. And so somehow this information had gotten leaked about our location.
Good morning, Portland. I'm Kara Dansky, president of WDI USA, and I'm standing here with Leah Keith from Wolf. I'm the founder of Wolf. So we woke up this morning in our Airbnb to find all of the tires deflated in all of the cars that we have. We have reason to know that Trantifa has the address of our Airbnb. We are concerned that they also may have the code to enter our actual Airbnb. This is what we're dealing with this morning. We are going full speed ahead with our event at the library in close connection with library security and the Portland Police. Anything to add, Leah?
You can stalk us all you want. We are never going to shut up.
We are never going to shut up. Hi, Portland. We'll see you soon.
And then overnight, the library was vandalized. And yeah, we were told the library was covered in graffiti. And so they decided to close the library to the public that day, but still they were going to allow our event to continue. So then they asked us to wait to come to the library until they could secure the rear entrance where we were going to go in. But then they said that the mob is circling the building and there's no way they're going to be able to secure our entrance into the building. So they basically advised us to, this all happened so fast. We were on our way. We could tell we were being surveilled as we drove to the library in these rental cars. And then county security asked us to stop, and we waited with them inside one of the vans. And they said that there was now a danger to people who lived above the library, as well as people in surrounding establishments. And so they said, like, we're very concerned for these other folks' safety, library staff and nearby patrons and such. So she basically advised us to cancel the event, but said that she had the Portland Police Bureau sergeant on speed dial and was ready to call him as soon as the crime was committed.
So can I was this security, or when
this was still county security?
So it's the police force, is it?
No, this is actually, was like plainclothes, a security officer, like in charge of multiple county buildings, but not not like a uniformed officer. Yeah, she was over the whole county, not specifically at the library and not with the police. But yeah, she assured us that they were like ready to contact police. So we made the decision we were gonna move forward and do our talks in a public, just on the street in public with, so that we wouldn't endanger these other like library patrons and the people living above the library. So that's what we did. We went, we were about a block from the library and we were on this corner. Like, this was a residential neighborhood, like, close to the library. And we got out and had our sign that said like woman equals adult human female. And there were 10 of us, and we just, set up there, and we just started with our speeches. And Kara gave an introduction, and then halfway through the first speech, there was this mob, like we could hear them, like as we were setting up with the sign and everything. We could see them coming. They were like throwing these firecrackers on the ground, and they were loud, like they sounded like gunshots. And they were moving toward us. They were, their faces were covered, they were masked, so you couldn't see their faces. And they appeared to be pretty much all men. I think there were a couple women who were like shouting, but everyone who was violent towards us was male. But yeah, so they just came at us, and as we were like halfway through the first speech, and they were like throwing these like full cans at us, and they came up to several women with this like big canister of something, and were spraying us with it. And we're not sure exactly what it was, but it was some kind of like pepper spray or bear spray. And it was, they were like temporarily blinded.
We started hearing people chanting and calling us names as they were coming up the street and making loud noises. They began throwing things at us from about 40 or 50 feet away. They hit Lier a couple of times, I think. Somebody threw something at me, and it was cold and wet in my face. I didn't know what it was. Then they came and grabbed my phone and smashed it. A few minutes later, my eyes started burning like crazy. It had been a full can of pepper spray.
It was really horrific. And I mean, it took like days to get it out, of their skin, their clothes.
At the corner of my eye, I saw some yellowy orange liquid. I knew immediately what it was, so I closed my eyes, and my right eye still got basically pepper sprayed, and I was burning. And as I was trying to like turn away from it, I felt somebody either push me or punch me, I think possibly in the face, and I fell down. The glasses broke, and half of them are just laying on the street somewhere in Portland. I fell down, and I started to walk away, and as me and Elizabeth were walking away, we saw a totally unrelated elderly woman, maybe in her 70s, walking alongside us, and she had nothing to do with us. She had nothing to do with politics or anything. She just wanted to know what was going on. And I believe they pushed her, or they punched her, they did something with her. They threw something at her, and she fell down.
But yeah, they came at us and attacked us, and the women who they were, pepper spraying at close range, they, after they were blinded, they were like punching them to the ground and hitting them.
Oh my God.
And so, I mean, yeah, there were 10 of us, and we were, we kind of went in different directions, but we eventually some of them made it into a Whole Foods because they were trying to get something to get the pepper spray out of their eyes. And several of these Antifa followed us into the Whole Foods, and kept following us as we, as we left and made it to our vans. There were a few friends who were driving the vans, and we got into their. We were in touch with them, and we got into the vans and were able to leave.
How many would you estimate of these people in masks? How many do you think there were?
Maybe 40.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. There's quite a few. And 10 of us.
And how were you feeling at that time, like in that moment?
I mean, it was terrifying. I really thought, like, the really scary part for me was when they were coming towards us, and I heard the firecrackers, and I really thought, like, I really thought it was a gun, and I thought someone's gonna get shot.
Yeah.
You've already got that in the back of your mind that there is going to be a gun there.
Yeah.
So the first thing you'd think of was, oh my God, someone. Oh,
yeah.
It's just mad.
Yeah. And I mean, this ratchets up the risk of any event in the US, because we have this horrible problem with gun violence. And
where were the police? Weren't they on speed dial?
They never came.
Yeah.
We did. So when we got into the waiting van and got back to the Airbnb, several hours later, a couple police officers did come and take our statements. But yeah, they never showed up on the scene at all.
And how were they towards you, these police? Did you?
How were they?
Yeah, like, did you feel that they were there to help, or it just seems strange that it was concerted effort not to turn up, to leave you vulnerable?
So, I mean, Portland police has been, well, I don't have exact stats on the degree to which this is true, but certainly their forces have been minimized, defunded, and so they're very overworked. They say they are, and they did specifically tell us that they are under instructions to not respond until there is basically until someone's life is in danger. Like it's not even enough that it's a crime or an assault. Like it has to be.
But I guess life was in danger.
Sorry?
Life was in danger.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, just so vulnerable with all those men, and they're so gutless the way they mask up.
Yeah, right. I mean, it was just, total, they're total cowards, I mean, to not show their faces. And one of the women who really got severely pepper sprayed, Melinda, she was saying that she remembers hearing them say things like, like Portland is one of the only places that we're safe, or like something along those lines. And it was just this complete, Darvo victim blaming, situation of, like literally as they're beating women up, they're saying this. So yeah, it was all pretty wild. It's taken some time to process. And I was not even particularly physically hurt. I mean, definitely less so than a few of the other women. There were 4 women who ended up needing to go to the emergency room to deal with the pepper spray in their eyes, because it was just horrible. But yeah, I got a little bit of the pepper spray, but it was I could pretty much wash it off like after like that night. And I got hit in the leg with a can. But otherwise I was mostly, physically okay.
Your specific activism is non-violent direct action. So you will never respond. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a whole stance that we have around violence, as we don't believe in violence as a form of activism. We as an organization, and that certainly doesn't mean that we that we want harm to come to anyone who's participating in this, and it doesn't mean that we're that we don't want to tell women to not be upset, or that they never have a right to defend themselves in any and all circumstances. But in this particular, for this particular tactic, we are choosing to not fight the people fighting us.
And I guess you're going to be more vulnerable to these men anyway. So they're big.
Right. If we were to respond with our fist, we would not win.
Yeah.
And put it bluntly.
Yeah.
And also, but more to the point, if this is what the world sees women doing, they just see it as different groups clashing. Like it's not clear where the violence is originating from. And so it really doesn't serve our interests as a movement, to arm ourselves, either with guns or with, fighting back physically.
And wasn't there a an older woman that had nothing to do with WDI that was walking down the street, and she got attacked also?
Yes, unfortunately, there was a woman who was, just walking down the street and got knocked down. I don't explicitly remember that part, but yeah, we walked with her to a nearby house, and a couple of us were dealing with the pepper spray there, and we were able to, walk with her to safety.
So what did the people in the house that you took her to, did they witness any of what was going on? But were there witnesses, just the public witnessing what was going on?
There was one random male bystander who I do remember him like kind of getting in between some of the attackers and us and saying like, stop, like stop this. And he seemed to kind of keep them at bay for a second. I mean, it was clear that, having a man get in the way kind of did something, but yeah, it's not, I mean, we never want people who are uninvolved, in this action to be hurt either. And that's, that's something that we always have to weigh. And of course we decided to have our event on the sidewalk because we wanted to protect the larger numbers of people who were like right by the library and who are living above the library. And so it's hard to eliminate the risk completely.
Did you ever find out how they knew about where you were staying?
We're not sure, but we are gonna be checking our vetting processes, extremely carefully and making sure that doesn't happen.
It just feels like these people never get any punishment, and they're just kind of allowed to. I feel like a lot of these so-called trans rights activists aren't trans identifying as well. They're men who want an excuse to be able to go and abuse women. And there's so many men who enjoy doing that. I had no idea how many men just want to go and abuse women. It's really shocking when you realize.
Yeah. Well, it seems to depend on the context a little bit, like in the different cities that we've had these events. Like in San Francisco, there were a lot of like, men who were clearly trans identifying or, dressing like women, or really more like drag. But in Portland, the men were completely masculine looking. I mean, it wasn't clear that any of them were trans identifying. They were just, adult, 20 to 40 something year old men. Like,
so that they were, weren't they? Or as the term you use, Trantifa.
Oh, Trantifa. Yeah. I think Karadansky uses that word all the time. Yeah. It's a very efficient way to describe them.
Yeah.
I saw some criticism for the way that you do things as well from some women who just love to criticize. I don't see them doing much apart from criticizing other women, which is very bizarre to me as well. And I was on the fence with it before I heard your talk, which I'm going to link to. You did a talk last week for WDI explaining, and for me it made sense. You said it doesn't waste energy hiding our pain, but redirects the energy in a disciplined way towards a future that is centered on women's loyalty and our love for each other, which might make me cry because I just think that's a beautiful way of putting it. And I feel very exasperated with the fact that it's come to this. And I don't know how much more can happen before every week, every month that this goes on. I think this is surely like it can't get any worse. So are you going to continue to do this for as long as it takes, or has Portland put you off? Or
no, and I really appreciate everything you just said. It's nice to be quoted. Yeah, I am not the least bit put off. I'm not gonna stop my involvement in these actions at all. I think it's important to point out that, you know, some of the criticisms that we've gotten have been perfectly fair and taken in good faith, and we're gonna, we've tried to be very open to receiving people's good faith criticisms. We've had these Twitter spaces and meetings with the WDI volunteers and meetings with the Portland participants, and just external and internal meetings around what we can do better and how we want to continue these. But I think it's important to point out that, especially with all the participants who have gone through a whole training and then done an action, I have hardly heard anyone say, like, this was a waste of time, I wouldn't do it again. Even with Portland, even with those 10 women, some of whom were new. For some of them, this was the first action or the first thing with WDI that they'd ever done. And they are all saying, this was worth it and I would do it again, and I'm glad to have done it.
Actually,
and I think
in August, we were doing an action. There was a National Labor, it's one of the political parties in Australia, and there were a number of groups that were protesting in that area, and there was a Greens party there, and they surrounded us. We didn't get hurt, but they were pretty aggressive. The police had to come in and remove us.
Turns out, welcome here. 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 Men are not women. Turns out, welcome here. Men are not women.
When we left there, we went and debriefed, and not one was put off by it. It sort of just strengthens your resolve more than scare you off. And I don't think these men that are doing that to women realise that they're not going to put us off.
Right. It's not working the way they think.
They're trying
that's
to,
kind of it's the paradox of this strategy is it's even if we're scared or in pain in the moment, we know that we're not gonna give up. And I think it's I mentioned this in that feminist question time talk, that we need to be strong enough as a group. We don't need to be strong enough individually. Like I feel like this sort of that individualism that's something that the patriarchy tells us, and we don't need to listen to that. We're doing this together. We're not doing this to prove anything individually about ourselves. It's about the movement and us as a sex class as a whole. So
how did you debrief after you sort of were able to take a breath and you all came together afterwards? How was everyone? Like you were saying that it didn't deter them, but there must have been some emotions flowing.
It was, I mean, we were still in a state of heightened alert, I would say, for sure. We decided to, rather than disperse that night, we decided to hire a private security detail, which, for these events, we don't have private security, and we never will do that. But we were nervous about any harm coming to the house, because we were in this, rental house, and we didn't want, and we knew that they knew where we lived or where we were staying. And so we didn't want them to vandalize the house. And so we decided to, and of course we didn't have faith in the police by this point. So we decided to hire security for that night. And then we could relax a little bit. The rest of the night is a bit of a blur. The other important thing we did do that night is we recorded the speeches that we would have given if we had been able to. And so I can share those with you as well. But yeah, they were all about violence against women in different forms. And the speech that I gave was about men in women's prisons, and a lot of specific instances of very violent men who have then gone on to assault women when they're incarcerated with them. And so it's, yeah, I was trying to just give as many examples as I could find of this happening, and drive home that it really does happen more than we want to think about. We are very skeptical of the data that we got through those FOIA requests.
Yeah.
So,
it's really crazy that you can't even trust government data anymore.
And many states didn't share. They just didn't respond. So I mean, like more effort to make them respond would be good. But yeah, it's depends on how far we want to take that. But yeah, that was quite an eye-opening project.
So in the Airbnb, did you stay there through to the next day, or when did you sort of disperse from that?
Yeah, we stayed. So the event was Sunday. We got security Sunday night, and then we basically headed out Monday morning.
Were you a bit worried that the security you were hiring were trans activists? I like to call them extremists, because trans activist sounds like they're fighting a decent.
Sounds legitimate. They're not legitimate.
Right. It's way too generous to call them activists. No, they seemed. I'm not sure. I'm actually not sure how much context they had for why we needed security, but they were totally polite and professional. Yeah, and they said that actually there were at least 1 or 2 cars that were that had been circling like our house where we were staying, and one of them was like, peering closely, and then once they saw the security, they just like bolted.
Yeah.
So I think that was money well spent.
Definitely.
They're such cowards.
Yeah.
They're such cowards. I've never known a group of people to be so, and they think they're so on the fringe, or they're so punk, but they're completely reliant on the state. They have every organization,
is supporting them, and
yeah, or oppressed minority that has any minority in history had this much power.
And they're almost all white men too.
Yeah,
which I find. Yeah.
So have you got any more actions planned, or do you not talk about it until it's like the time to go?
Well, so we're in the early stages of planning trainings. We're thinking to do some standalone trainings that are not connected to an action next year. Yeah, that's about all I can say. We haven't announced them yet, but we really want women who are, well, of course we want women everywhere to sign the declaration. And if you're in the US, we want you to become a volunteer with us so that you can learn when these trainings are happening.
So that the volunteers are increasing, or the members, it's an increase of women gradually?
I'm not positive. I don't want to misquote about signatories. I don't know that has changed a lot. I know that in the wake of Portland, the number of Twitter followers increased by 2,000.
Oh wow, yeah.
So that was great news.
That's one of the great things about it, because when people see, they peak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an awesome,
want to happen.
Yeah, one of the brilliant videos I saw from you guys, brilliant in a weird way, because it included assault, but I think it was outside the prison, and the woman who peaked in real time.
Oh, with the pies and Oakland,
yeah.
I wasn't at that one, but I've seen the footage, and it's just beautiful. So this was before my time, but there was a group who was protesting in Oakland about Dana Rivers, this man who, I forget his real name, but a man who murdered this lesbian couple and their son.
Yeah,
and he's now in women's prison.
My body chemistry and physical shape is changing.
Back in June of 1999, David Warfield was an award-winning teacher who was leaving for summer break to make the biggest transition of his life. He returned in the fall as a woman, Dana Rivers, only to be placed on paid leave because he told some of his students about his sex change.
Ms. Rivers was given specific instructions as to not to discuss this information with students. This was violated. The conduct is at issue here, not her transgender orientation.
The district is paying me not to work. How logical is that?
Dana Rivers' plight was all over the airwaves. Students rallied behind her, and school board meetings became heated. Rivers said at the time all she wanted to do was teach.
I'm a teacher by trade. Teaching is a calling. I'm passionate about my career and about working with young people.
She ultimately resigned from Center High School, sued the district, settled for $150,000, and moved to the Bay Area, where she continued as an activist for transgender issues. She fell off the radar until last week, when police spotted her coming out of the burning home where they found bodies of 2 women. Police believe Rivers set the home on fire to hide the bodies. The couple's adopted son was found in the driveway. Police said Rivers was covered in blood and they found ammunition in her pockets, but haven't offered any kind of motive for the triple murder.
A former Sacramento area teacher has been charged in a triple homicide in Oakland. 61-year-old Dana Rivers is being held without bail on charges of arson and 3 counts of murder. Rivers made national headlines 17 years ago when she was fired from Center High School in Antelope after undergoing a sex change. She's accused of shooting and stabbing deaths of an Oakland couple and their son.
And so, yeah, so they were standing outside in Oakland with this banner that said Dana Rivers is a man. And this woman passing by, which I started to chat with them, and you can see in the video she's concerned about poor Dana Rivers' safety.
I mean, our systems need to be overhauled, and they need to be talked about in public. The public needs to know how violent they are. And how many times people do not get the help if they're going to be brought back into society. They come back in worse. So my question is, I recognize this person as a man, and I'm sorry that the travesty occurred to her victims and herself. But do you think that it's justice if she's put in a violent with other men because they're stronger?
We are not out here to engage right now with the public. We're doing a silent protest, but you can go to the website of this organization and you can read all about it, and we will dialogue with you. We're not going to do it today.
I did read about it briefly here.
Okay.
And I do have criminal justice.
We're open to it. We're just not doing that today.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do have that.
And then these masked men come and run their bicycles into the women standing there and throw pies at them and steal their banner.
I do have that education. Oh, I have that. Whoa. What's this about? Why are we doing this? They're violent. They're violent men. This is male. Why are we doing this?
These are violent men. These are violent men. They're violent men, and they just had fun. Yeah, these are the men that we like to not have to be in prison with. So.
What the hell?
What did you think they were? Yeah, this is what did you think they do? So I don't know why you would think anything. I don't quite get the.
I don't get that. Why did they took your sign?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. Oh my God, freedom of expression. Who are these people?
Yes.
Holy crap.
And
I didn't even plan on being here. Thank you for being here. Holy
Hey, buddy. Hey,
This is what we're up against. This has happened in Portland, in Tacoma, in
why can't we have a
Chicago,
dialogue?
in New York.
Why can't we have a dialogue?
I have people
Sorry.
Hello.
Holy crap! I wasn't prepared for that.
I'm so sorry you were in the midst of it.
This is what we're talking about.
Really
Why
great
can't
women.
Why can't you just have a dialogue?
They later posted a picture on Twitter of themselves burning the banner. And this woman is like, what's happening? Don't you have free speech? Like, how are these men allowed to do this? And just immediately peaks.
Oh, that's great.
It's fantastic.
That's what you want, isn't it? That's the best outcome that you can have from your actions, is just, well, that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to highlight the violence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It doesn't seem real that women all over the world, or in the Western world, are having to go through this after everything that was won throughout history.
Right. And I wish I could remember who said this, but because it's a great quote. It's something like women in poorer countries haven't even been able to taste the freedoms that women in the Western countries are already giving away to men. And like, that's just, yeah, that's so heartbreaking to know like how hard those fights were to get like those single sex spaces, and to know that now you're called a bigot if you insist on them.
I feel like now it's harder because, okay, let's take for example, women fighting for the vote. They didn't have to deal with an indoctrination of the generation below them. They didn't have that to contend with as well. So that makes me really worry about how this is going to be won. And it must be won because there's no alternative. The alternative is inconceivable. But how do you deal with a generation that's literally being indoctrinated to think that this is normal when it's in schools?
It's such a, I don't have a great answer. I mean, I really feel for kids. I mean, both boys and girls, especially girls, but kids who grew up with social media from the get-go. Because I was like just old enough to where, like, when I was starting college, social media was becoming a big thing. So I was pretty much already socialized by that point. And I'm so glad I didn't have it any sooner.
100%.
Because it's so pervasive, and I mean, messing with your self-esteem is like the least of it, really. But it certainly does that. But I just, I can't imagine being just how easy it is to start to question, your identity when your identity is still forming, and someone's saying, if you don't fit this exact stereotype, maybe you're trans, and just like putting those ideas in vulnerable kids' heads is just, it's so hard to, I really feel for them.
And they can now have an avatar. They can choose an online, it doesn't even have to be a picture of them. They can choose if they want to appear online as a male or a female or a non-binary or anything. And it's like these children now have a complete alternative universe. And it's really, really disturbing.
There are kids though, and Leah and I saw that when we were doing a protest outside of the Queensland government back in October. There was a school teacher bringing her kids through to Parliament to watch Parliament, and she was very radicalised, and she was having a go at us. We just had banners, woman, adult, human, female, and then hate speech is, what was it, Leah, the second banner?
It's been a long time since I've got that one out.
Something like
hate to speak the truth, or I think it was Magdalene Burns quote.
So she's having a go at us, telling us to put the signs away, and kids are walking behind her giving us the thumbs up, and 11-year-olds that were, encouraging us, of course, behind the teacher's back.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's interesting. Wow. Yeah. So it's already starting to flip back, that like the youngest kids.
I think there's probably a lot of TERF mums. I think that's going to really help. The amount of women now having babies who are just not into this shit.
Right. Yeah. baby
and it's
sheriffs.
but I do worry for the generation that has been caught up in this.
And our legislators that are caught up in it, that you know, are allowing this to happen, and how it's just taken over entire governments around the Western world. It's just mind-blowing. Did you get, Irene, did you get much media from what happened in Portland? Any coverage?
Not a whole lot. Some a few local outlets that were hit and miss in their coverage, I would say. And of course, a couple feminist publications. I mean, we've gotten the attention of a handful of left-leaning media outlets, but there's nothing has been published, certainly in the mainstream media or legacy media, on this. But we don't see that as a reason to not keep doing it. I mean, I think we need more of these public actions to keep piquing people, and eventually we'll break through.
The suffragettes in the United Kingdom back in the early 20th century, they were, one of their main aims was to get media attention. They weren't getting media attention. So in that respect, it's sort of similar to what's happening now, is the lack of media attention, but they kept going. And eventually they will. It's just a point.
Yeah. I think it's going back to the kids part. I think it's, we often talk in WDI about how it's going to be the kids, or it's going to be the parents of trans kids that are really holding on the longest. And I wonder what will become of them when this is no longer a fad and their bodies are permanently damaged. And it's really hard to contemplate. I mean, because people will peak eventually. But meanwhile, the kids whose bodies have been medicalized, like, there's no going back to some degree.
And that's the hardest part of all of this, is that once this is over, that we can all get on with our lives, but it's the kids that will be left with all this regret and illnesses from what they've done, their bodies. Will be never ending for them. And
it's ironic that it will probably be the TERFs that help them and set up things to help these kids. And the people pushing it will be long gone. How depressing.
Right. I mean, we radical feminists, like we've never wanted gender roles. We've never wanted sexual stereotypes to let kids think that they're wrong somehow for liking the wrong things, or like that's never been a part of the feminist agenda.
How a movement has been built upon stereotypes like this is insane. How are we here? And how do you think the friends that you lost will come back? Do you have hope for that? I sometimes think about that.
Yeah, I know some women who've been in this fight so much longer than me. They've said that some friends have actually started to like come back and apologize. I wonder. I mean, it seems like, I think eventually they will, if they were ever friends to begin with. But
then people that will never admit that they're wrong. I go, oh, I never said that. I never thought that.
Or just pretend that they never believed any of it. It's hard. It's kind of hard to imagine now being in it, like how it'll shake out. But I do think there are those people who will just never admit that they believed in this in the first place, or pretend they were always on your side or whatever. But
there'll be interesting times.
Next
10 years will be very interesting.
And the one thing we all know, it's not going to last.
And
I guess that's what gives us hope, is that it can't possibly continue. It may continue for a number of years, but they won't win. women have fought throughout history and won for rights. What makes these men think that we're going to be any different?
Yeah.
Right. But I do think what you were saying about the suffragettes not having this particular issue to contend with, of this like delusion, like mass delusion, like that's important, because
yeah,
I don't think, like I was talking to one of the participants in one of these actions whose great grandmother was a suffragette or marched for that, and she's like, she's just rolling in her grave now. Like they couldn't even have imagined that we would be fighting this. And it is hard when it's a matter of not just the rights that you have, but do you like, are you even in the category that should be fighting for those
I'm
rights?
surprised they haven't claimed some suffragettes to be trans women by now.
Well, they've already said that what the suffragettes, their main aim was to queer women.
Oh, I didn't hear that one. That's
trans said to me that we all think that we're sort of connected spiritually towards the suffragettes, but the suffragettes were all about queering women, because the majority of women are frustrated because they're really men and have never been able to express their male. Taken the suffragette flag and they call it the gender queer.
Wow. So you just have to laugh at it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah,
well, I know
maybe that's a good note to end on, because that did make me
laugh. They're trying to make Joan of Arc non-binary. I heard.
Also,
apparently
he was trans. Jesus Christ. He was.
Oh yeah. My church is very into the trans stuff, and they're into this whole thing of like God was the original they them.
Oh no.
Wow.
So and it's a lonely fight at the moment.
Oh, okay, well, happy Christmas, everybody. No, thank you, Irene, for coming to talk to us. Thank you for your bravery, and I wish you all the luck in the world. I suppose we do need a bit of luck in this, but in your fight forward, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me representing WDI. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
it's been lovely. All right, bye everyone.
Bye.